Well, hello venters, and welcome to my walking channel where the host, Jesse, that's me, walks every single day with you. I drink water every single day, and I'm on day 5 of no sugar, and I urge you guys to join me in that, even if you don't join me till tomorrow. Get rid of that sugar in your life. Let's do this together. And no, it's not forever, but at least for the next 40 days or 35 days, let's do this. We like to walk, and one of the best ways to walk is to kind of talk while we go about it. So you close your lips, try to breathe through your nose, and listen to my words as I speak to you, because I have an interesting story today, guys. 17-year-old Nikita Kasip had perfect attendance and was even a Student of the Month winner at his high school in Wisconsin. All of a sudden, this kid with perfect attendance began skipping school and then was arrested a couple states over in Kansas. The car he was in was stolen. It belonged to his stepfather, and they also noticed that he had a gun that also belonged to his stepfather there in the car as well. Meanwhile, officers decided to do a wellness check on his folks back in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and they found Tatiana Kasip and his stepfather, Don Mayer's body. They had both lost their lives. Don Mayer, his father, or his stepfather, I should say, was shot in the back, leading investigators to believe that he didn't see it coming. Meanwhile, his mom was shot in the front. I believe they said she was shot in the face, but either way, she didn't survive. All things point to the stepson, Nikita, doing this crime. However, right now he's being held in Kansas for stealing his stepfather's vehicle and possession of his stepfather's firearm. What's really weird is, how can it be considered stolen if he took his stepfather's life? It's not like his stepfather called in the car stolen, right? And technically speaking, you are allowed to drive your folks' vehicles. Now check this out. After allegedly shooting his parents, he went on a trip, but he didn't go straight to Kansas. He actually went through quite a few states and actually racked up over 2,100 miles in the process. So now investigators, as you can imagine, are trying to retrace Nikita's footsteps, so to speak, to see if he was working with anybody, if maybe he did any other crimes along the way. And they're just trying to kind of look up all the clues, or as many as they can get a hold of. The ultimate game plan is that he will probably be extradited from Kansas back to Wisconsin, where he'll be hopefully tried as an adult. Technically speaking, he's not an adult yet, but he is 17. So let's see what happens with that. A lot of times kids, when they're 15, 16, and 17, end up being treated as an adult, but I don't know if that happens necessarily in Wisconsin very often. In case you're wondering, how old is this case, Jesse? Sometimes you read some old stuff to us. Guys, this is really fresh. Apparently they found the bodies of his parents in their home in Waukesha on February 28th of this year, so we're talking just a couple of weeks back. He's only been charged with stealing his stepfather's car and then possessing a gun, which was also his stepfather's. So before we get to comments and questions, let's talk about this real quick. When I was growing up, there was a lot of teenage boys that didn't necessarily see eye to eye with their father, but I never really got the vibe that they wanted to eliminate their father. There was a lot of the proverbial, let's go in the backyard and fight, right? I never saw any friends have a fight with their dad, but I had always heard growing up that sometimes, sons and fathers would end up fighting to kind of figure out who was the man of the house. You assume that at one age or another, the son would eventually take over that mantle. But in this case, it sounds like the son just decided to eliminate his parents. So let's speculate. I wonder if he decided to take them out because they said no to a video game or to a request to take the car or something or another. But ultimately, they did tell him no or something that they disagreed with. and apparently he wasn't willing to take no for an answer. My father was never in my life, but just knowing what I know about myself, I don't think in my teenage years, if he would have been in my life, I don't think I would have been the type of guy to want to fight my father. But at the same time, you know, when heads collide and people are on different sides of an argument, you know, things can happen. I would imagine if your son beats you up, or if your dad ends up beating you up, I would imagine it makes the makeup of the family dinner pretty tense. I don't know if I'd want to eat dinner all the time with a guy that beat me up. At the same time, I'm not talking about a child abuse situation. I'm just saying sometimes teens and their dads disagree, and sometimes it leads to frustration, pushing, maybe an occasional fight. There's a coming of age that happens with young men, and there's that age where you say, you know what, I think I can take my old man. By the way, I found out that my dad was a Golden Gloves boxer back in the 70s and 80s. So apparently, even if I would have felt like I could have taken my old man in the back in my high school days, I probably couldn't have. So just in case you guys are wondering. By the way, that's one of those things that I learned recently from my cousin and my aunt on my dad's side, that he had aspirations to be a boxer in his youth. And I think that would have been something neat for my mom to share with me, but just to give you an idea, my mom is the type that whenever you ask her any questions about anything, her default answer is usually something along the lines of, I don't really know. And it's like, if that's your answer to everything that a boy says and asks about his father, you can imagine I didn't really find out too much about my dad. I was always led to believe that my dad lived in Oklahoma City, so he was this magical character that was too far away and we didn't have his phone number. But in reality, my mother always had access to calling him, and he only lived about 15 minutes away. So I don't know if my mother had some stuff on him that could get him in trouble or what, but apparently when I was very young, she told him to stay away. And apparently he listened. So whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, that's how it went down for me. Earlier this year, I tried to find out about my father, like literally right around Christmas and New Year's. And I was told that I was a little late, that my father passed away about 5 years ago. So I'm one of those guys that I never had a relationship with my dad, but now I wish I could. Let that be a lesson for some of you guys that are ditching your dad, or in this case with Nikita, taking his stepfather's life as well as his mom's. He's probably going to regret that for the rest of his days if he doesn't already. Fire Away Sweets says, if you do an adult crime, you do adult time. This is no longer a juvenile. What do you guys think should happen? My thinking is, if you're a big enough kid to pull the trigger, and you know what you're doing, because let's be honest, even a 10-year-old playing video games realizes, hey, when I pull the trigger, the character at the other end of the bullet loses their lives. I think kids are a lot less naive than we make them out to be. God, could you imagine raising somebody and one of your last pictures that you see in life is that somebody that you raise pointing a gun your way? And then just eternal blackness. Oh my goodness. By the way, I don't know if you guys heard about this. I don't know if it's Utah or some other state, but they were showing some guy that elected, because he was on death row, he elected to be to lose his life via firing squad. Did you guys hear about that? And here was the trippy thing. Apparently, this is the first execution via firing squad in that particular state that this guy's in since, I believe they said 2005 or 2010. Now, the reason I think it's interesting is because whenever we talk about, you know, people losing their life to the system, we usually talk about things like the electric chair or some sort of injection, right? Lethal injection. We usually don't talk about the firing squad. So just the whole thought that about 15 years ago or so, somebody actually got executed via firing squad, I feel like everyone should have known about that, don't you guys? That's incredible. And apparently you guys heard about this Koberger guy in Idaho, where supposedly he allegedly took the lives of those 4 students. Well, apparently, if he's found guilty, he could be facing a firing squad as well. I watched a show on News Nation where they talked to an expert, and they said, believe it or not, the firing squad is probably the actually nicest way to go, because it's going to be quick and instantaneous. And apparently there's different projectiles that hit you almost instantaneously. So no pain at all, but probably a gruesome sight. I would hate to have to clean that up. I've heard a lot of kids get really upset at their parents if they take away their cell phone, if they ground them from the video games. And those are 2 things that back in the day, people in the 80s and 90s would not have cared about either one of those things. Did they ground us off of our video games? Yes. But you got to remember, back then there was no video game action where you could play with somebody across the world, live. And people would note it, and you could talk to people. Back then it was just you playing a 1-player game by yourself. And if your buddy was there with you, you could plug in the second controller and you guys could play against each other, or even in some games on the same team, right? But again, it wasn't fun enough to make you want to eliminate your mom or dad over it. Parents have a lot of hurdles right now that even I don't give them credit for. If they try to spank their kid, they're going to go to jail for child abuse, right? If they try to discipline their kids don't have to listen to them, because they know if the parents try to, lay down the law and spank me or something, the parents are going to get in trouble. They go to the school, they mouth up and they act out to the teacher, and half the time their parents support them in this. The school doesn't necessarily back up the teacher. And then when it comes to the end of the year and deciding if you're going to pass or fail, most of the schools just pass you nowadays. Now, I'm just going based on rumors that I hear, and I'm sure you guys have heard this too. And it's leading to a teacher shortage. Now, that's a domino effect, isn't it? We have all these domino effects in the world that are just slowly but surely starting to hurt our country. On another note, day 5 of not eating sugar, and I can tell you one thing. When you cut out the sugar, you end up eating less of everything. Last night around 10:30 or 11, I'm laying on top of my bed. No, it was probably closer to 11:30, excuse me. I'm laying on top of my bed, and normally at that time, after I do my editing for the night show and stuff and do my uploads, guys, normally I look for some snack or something to eat. But the last 2 or 3 nights in a row, I haven't really been hungry at all. And that bleeds into the morning. In the morning when I wake up, I'm not necessarily hungry for breakfast right away. By the way, I'm eating plain oatmeal for breakfast, and I've been doing that. The only thing I was lacking over the last handful of weeks and months was I just felt like I was eating too much sugar. You get rid of the sugar and all of a sudden you almost have no hunger. So again, if you're really wondering how you can tip the scales in your favor, stop the sugar with me. Now, if you're on day 1 or day 2, it's going to be a little challenging. You're literally going to be thinking about it when you sleep. But once you get to day 5, like I am, I'm telling you, it gets easier and easier every day. Kelly Waller says, I worked with Don Mayer, that's the stepfather, for nearly 10 years. He was a very quiet and kind man. I'm shocked that this happened to him. So one day, I was reading the newspaper, and this was, literally about 30 years ago. I think I was reading it at my fiance's mom's house. My wife, before I married her, I was at her mom's house, and they had the newspaper. And there was this article about one of these guys that I went to school with named Brian Johnson. And the funny thing about his name, and I think it was Brian Johnson, I'm going on a memory, but from what I remember, there were 2 Brian Johnsons. I knew both of them, But I was friends with the one that looked like the type that would be a unaliver, but he was the innocent one. The other one was the cool one that you would think there'd be no way he would ever do this. But apparently he took his girlfriend out to the desert and just kind of did horrible things and left her there to perish. Apparently she faked like she was gone, so he went away. She ends up crawling out to the street, waving somebody down, and imagine how scary it must have been for that person to stop, because that looks straight out of a horror movie, doesn't it? You see some teenage girl walk out from the brush or from the side of the road all bloodied up, right? And so anyway, make a long story short, I'm reading about this guy that I went to high school with, same year and everything, and he literally was guilty of attempted unaliving. This is no joke. A year or so later, I find myself going to the courts for whatever reason. I don't even remember what the reason was, but I'm in the court building and I'm going up an elevator, and this is no joke, that same Brian Howard, not Brian Johnson, Brian Howard. There were two Brian Howards. The same Brian Howard and his attorney are in the elevator with me. Is that crazy or what? Oh my God. Here's an additional addendum to that story. A couple weeks later, I'm in my job and I'm talking to might have been a couple hours later actually, it kind of all blurs together, but I'm talking to one of my buddies at work, and we notice one of our coworkers has an ankle bracelet. What I didn't notice is that earlier when he was close by, I'm sitting here talking about how I'm in an elevator with a guy that's unaliving people, and little did I know this guy's got an ankle bracelet. He might be working here because, you know, maybe our boss didn't care if he had a criminal record, I guess. Thanks for telling us, boss. We're sitting in here working with a guy with an ankle bracelet. For all I know, he's getting ready to go to court for a similar crime. It's like, holy moly. That's why you always got to be aware of the room before you start talking. Could you imagine if I would have said, worthless criminal? I think they should throw all the criminals in the garbage. And meanwhile, you're literally sitting next to a guy with an ankle bracelet. Oh my God, ankle monitor. Holy moly. Levon Lewis says that is the problem with having guns in the house around unstable children. Yeah, if your kids get really upset at video games and they really fly off the handle when you tell them no, because I understand that nowadays, a lot of kids can't accept no. If those kids are under your roof, hide the guns. It's really sad when you hear these kids have access to their parents' guns, and then they end up taking the guns and either using it on the parents in this case, or you guys know as well as I do, they end up taking it to school and doing a shooting at the school. We as Americans don't want any of that to happen. Lock up your guns. Your kids don't need to know where your guns are all the time. I think that's the one problem with guns. Everybody has a little bit of an infatuation, and everybody wants to show everybody, hey, let me show you this gun and the parts, and let me give you a tutorial. How about you save the tutorial for the kids that are stable? This kid had perfect attendance and was student of the month before this weird stuff happened. So I would imagine at one point in time, he was that stable kid that his parents thought could handle learning about guns. James R. 1703 said, this kid was told no just once, and this is the result. Yeah, so they alluded to the fact that he had some sort of disagreement with his mom and dad. I don't know if it was over video games. I don't know if it was over the car. But either way, they paid for it handsomely, didn't they? Ashley Russell says, being unalived by someone you love and raised has to be the worst feeling in the world. Ashley, I would disagree. If it's a fast enough bullet, you probably don't even have time to contemplate your feelings. So the dad was taken out by a shot in the back. He probably didn't see it coming. But the mom was shot from the front. That must have been a horrific last couple seconds for her. It makes you wonder, did she try begging her son? Did she assume that her son, her good little boy, was just BSing her? And was she like, put the gun away, stupid, you're in a lot of trouble? You know, sometimes people don't know when they don't have any cards, right? That's what President Trump would say. You don't have any cards. She might have been going in there thinking she was, Zelensky, that she was going to fight back against the Nikita. God, Nikita's like a classic Russian name too. Saddle Tramp official says too many young adults don't feel a bond or a love for their parents today. I suppose that's what is liable to happen if you let laptops raise your kids. I don't know why she said laptops. I think these kids are raised by their cell phones, and I think that schools could actually help out parents a lot by forbidding them in schools. If we get rid of these cell phones, we have to have a way for people to communicate with the outside world just in case there's a shooter on campus. So do you guys remember that one school a couple of months back where the teachers had little placards on their chest? I forget the name of it right now, your name tag. And on the name tag, apparently it had two buttons, one for fire and medical and the other for the police department. If you're going to get rid of the cell phones in class, then what you need to do is you need to have some sort of emergency button somewhere in that classroom where kids can push it and it'll automatically let authorities know there's some sort of emergency situation at the school. You need to send fire, medical, or the police. But we need to get these cell phones out. The kids are literally too addicted to their cell phones. I saw the funniest thing last year. Tell me somebody remembers this. Last year, there was a substitute teacher that took a girl's cell phone and they went into the hall, and all of a sudden the teacher is screaming because the student pepper sprayed him in the face. And instead of anybody helping him, they just all pulled out their phones and recorded it to go viral. Do you guys remember that? If you don't, let's Google it together and look at it, because it's kind of silly, kind of fun, but at the same time kind of scary, because it just goes to show you that when you and I were kids, if they took away one of our toys or they took away our beeper, because sometimes they did do that, right? It wasn't the end of the world. We handed over our beeper. We handed over our little Nintendo toy that we had, right? I forget the name of the Nintendo portable thing we had. We would do that. It was just a normal part of being a kid. It was just paying respect to your teachers. Now the teachers and the parents, they fear the kids. It's a different world. But I'll see you tomorrow. We'll walk in it again. Bye-bye.